All right, get ready, because we're diving deep into Warhammer 40K lore.
Deep indeed.
And specifically, the Horus Heresy.
Yeah, one of the big ones.
And to guide us through this galaxy-spanning war, we've got Visions of Heresy, this art and lore book.
It's quite the art book.
It really is visually stunning, and it's more than just pretty pictures, right? It gives us this really in-depth look at the events that cause this whole galaxy-spanning conflict.
Like we're talking about fundamental truths about power and ambition.
Exactly. The things that make this universe so grimly fascinating.
So the book really sets the scene for us right off the bat.
Okay.
We are introduced to the Emperor at like the peak of his power, right?
Right at top.
Reunited Terra after millennia of strife, forged an alliance with the Mechanicum on Mars, created the Space Marine Legions.
Each led by a Primarch, his genetically engineered sons.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a vision that's both awe-inspiring and kind of terrifying when you think about the scope.
No kidding. It's talk about ambition, right?
No kidding.
But there's this underlying tension, flipping through these amazing visuals.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't shake this sense of foreboding.
Absolutely. That's one of the things Visions of Heresy does so well. It hints at these cracks in this seemingly perfect facade.
Like what?
Well, take the Emperor, for example.
Okay.
The book mentions that he was having these disturbing dreams.
Dreams.
Yeah, dreams. But for a being as powerful as him, they wouldn't just be dreams, right?
You think they were like psychic visions or something?
Exactly. They'd be like premonitions echoing through the war.
That's a chilling thought. I mean, what kind of nightmare would haunt the mind of the most powerful psyker in the galaxy?
Right. Makes you wonder if he was catching glimpses of the Horus Heresy before it even began, you know?
Or maybe they were his own fears bubbling to the surface, like deep down, he knew his grand plan was doomed to fail.
It's like this tragic element to his story, you know? He can see across galaxies, united humanity after ages of darkness, yet he's still haunted by these nightmares.
I've had some vivid dreams in my time, and those are unsettling enough. But for the Emperor, amplified 1,000-fold.
Exactly. It really speaks to that idea that even with ultimate power, some things are beyond your control, you know?
Yeah, fate has a way of playing its hand.
It's a classic Greek tragedy, but on a galactic scale, you know?
Speaking of tragedy, let's talk about Horus, the Emperor's favorite son.
Horus, the architect of his own downfall.
Right. If the Emperor is the grand architect of this whole thing, then Horus is his, star pupil.
Exactly. And the book highlights some key moments that lead to his turn.
What happened?
Well, there's this one incident on the planet, Davin. Horus is mortally wounded, and the only way to save him is through this local cult.
A cult? What kind of cult?
Let's just say they were a little unorthodox in their methods.
Okay, I'm sensing some shady stuff here.
It's during this whole ordeal that Horus gets his first real taste of chaos. Those whispers, the promises of power, they start to take root.
So it's like the classic deal with the devil kind of thing.
In a way, but it's more nuanced than that. Visions of Heresy shows us that Horus isn't just a pawn, you know. It highlights his doubts about the Emperor's true goals. Like, did he really care about humanity? Or were they just tools for his grand plan?
Interesting. So even the Emperor's most trusted son felt that distance.
Exactly, and that's the point, right? Instead of genuine loyalty, there was this underlying unease.
It's like those rulers who get so fixated on their vision, they become blind to everything else.
And they surround themselves with yes men who tell them what they want to hear.
And that always backfires, right? Creates resentment, even among those who believe in the cause.
It makes you wonder, could the Emperor have avoided all of this if he had just listened?
Right, if he'd been more open to dialogue with his sons.
It's a question that's debated endlessly.
I bet.
But the book doesn't give us easy answers, and that's what I find so fascinating.
Yeah, the ambiguity, the complexity of it all.
It shows us that even the most horrific events are never black and white. There are always shades of gray. Motives, good and bad.
And consequences that ripple outward in ways we can't even begin to grasp. So we've talked about the Emperor's grand vision and the seeds of doubt, but Visions of Heresy doesn't just talk about it. It throws us right into the thick of it with the battles of the Istvan system.
Talk about an intense escalation.
It really is. And the book captures the horror of those early battles so well, especially at Istvan III.
Oh, yeah.
It's one thing to read about legions clashing, but this book puts you right there in the fight.
Right in the thick of it.
It's visceral, chaotic. You really feel what it must have been like to see brother turn against brother.
It's that shattering of brotherhood that makes it all so tragic.
Absolutely. And the way the book describes the virus bombs, just terrifying.
Talk about a grim way to start a war.
Seriously.
Horus lures these loyal legions to Istvan, right?
Under false pretenses, of course.
Oh, of course, it's a trap, all part of his plan to cripple the Emperor's forces.
And the virus bombs are just, well...
They're not just weapons, they're designed to terrorize. The book describes this plague that just rips through organic matter.
6 billion people.
Yawn. Just like that.
It's unimaginable.
And the worst part is Horus isn't just targeting enemy soldiers, he's wiping out entire planets.
It's a chilling reminder of how easily morality gets tossed aside during war.
Twisted and discarded in pursuit of some greater good, it makes you wonder, when do you become the monster you're fighting?
Right. But even amidst all that darkness, there are these glimmers of hope in the book.
Absolutely, like the story of Captain Garrow.
From the Death Guard, he escapes Istvan III with proof of the betrayal.
Barely escapes. His ship was practically in pieces.
But he makes it through the warp, carrying a message that could change everything.
It's a testament to those who stayed loyal to the Emperor, even when everything was falling apart.
But what if, what if he hadn't made it?
But what about those who didn't escape? Those trapped on Istvan III, surrounded by their former brothers, now turned enemy.
Their story is where Visions of Heresy gets even more intense.
It becomes a psychological nightmare for these loyalists.
I bet they're not just fighting for their lives at that point.
They're fighting to understand how everything they believed in, everything they were raised on, could be a lie.
The book does a great job of portraying that sense of utter betrayal they must have felt.
It really highlights the tragic core of the Horus Heresy. It's not just about battles and planets. It's about the shattering of brotherhood.
You've got these warriors genetically engineered for war, trained from birth to fight as one, and suddenly they're forced to kill each other.
Hauntingly tragic.
And the book drives that point home when it describes the loyalist survivors. You've got Iron Hands fighting alongside Salamanders, Raven Guard defending Imperial Army regiments. It's all a jumbled mess.
Old rivalries forgotten in the face of this new, terrifying enemy.
But the fighting is still brutal, right?
Absolutely. Visions of Heresy doesn't sugarcoat the violence. It shows just how brutal combat between these superhuman warriors could be.
These aren't just nameless enemies. These are friends, brothers in arms, and that makes it all the more impactful.
It adds this whole other level of tragedy and complexity to the war.
Exactly. It reminds us that even in a galaxy of super soldiers and spaceships, war is still fought between individuals, each with their own stories and scars.
And just when you think things can't get any worse, the nightmare continues at Istvan V.
Right, because Horus, being the brilliant strategist he is, isn't content with just scattering the loyalists.
He wants to crush them completely, so he sets another trap, this time at Istvan V.
It's like watching a grandmaster chess player, only the pieces are legions of space marines, and the board is an entire star system.
And the stakes. The fate of the galaxy.
Okay, no pressure then. But things don't go well for the loyalists there either, do they?
No, Istvan V is another devastating blow for the Emperor's forces.
It cements Horus's control over the traitor legions and shows just how vulnerable the Imperium has become.
And with the ruin storm spreading, things are about to get a whole lot worse.
Right, it's like that moment when the lights go out in a haunted house. Suddenly every shadow holds a new terror.
The Astronomicon, that beacon guiding interstellar travel, it flickers and dims as the ruin storm takes hold.
And the galaxy descends further into chaos. So we've got a galaxy reeling from the betrayals at Istvan, the Astronomicon on the verge of collapse, and the ruin storm tightening its grip on the Imperium. It's a grim picture, but Visions of Heresy doesn't hold back. It takes us straight to the climax, the Siege of Terra.
And the book truly captures the scale of that siege, the sheer desperation. Terra, once this beacon of unity, becomes a fortress world, bracing for the full might of Horus's legions.
It's a testament to Rogel Dorn and the Imperial Fist that Terra even stood a chance.
Absolutely. But the book doesn't just focus on the big picture, it zooms in on the human cost of it all.
Right, the everyday people facing these unimaginable horrors, clinging to hope, while everything around them is falling apart.
And it really contrasts with that grand vision the Emperor had, of a unified, enlightened humanity.
Yeah, and speaking of the Emperor, we see the agonizing choice he has to make with the Astronomicon.
Ah, yes. To keep that beacon lit, even dimly, he has to draw on the most extreme measures.
Just sacrificing psychers, burning through their life force just to buy the Imperium sometime.
A grim reminder that even the most powerful beings have to make impossible choices, especially during war.
It makes you wonder, does the end ever justify the means, even on a galactic scale?
It's the question at the heart of the heresy, isn't it? And speaking of which, what about Horus during all of this? What's going through his head as his forces close in on Terra?
Right. What does victory even look like to him at this point?
Visions of Heresy doesn't shy away from showing us just how corrupted by chaos Horus has become. This isn't just a rebellious son anymore.
He's become something else entirely.
A conduit for the warp's power, consumed by this twisted idea of his own destiny.
So he's become the very tyrant he claimed to be fighting against.
The book really emphasizes that tragic irony. Horus believes he's doing what needs to be done, creating a new order from the ashes of the old.
But in doing so, he becomes a mirror image of the Emperor, driven by the same lust for power.
It's a classic tale of ambition gone wrong, blinded by the belief that the ends justify any means.
But it's not all darkness and despair. There are still glimmers of hope, moments of heroism that show us why the Imperium, even fractured, is worth fighting for.
Like the arrival of the White Scars and the Blood Angels at Terra, they could have stayed out of the fight, preserved their own strength.
But they chose to answer the call, fighting their way through the traitor blockade to reach Terra.
Knowing they might be too late to save the Emperor, but determined to make their stand regardless.
It's a powerful moment. Speaks to that sense of loyalty, of brotherhood that still existed among some of the legions.
They knew the odds, they knew they were facing their former brothers, but they fought on anyway.
Gives you chills just thinking about it. And then there's the Emperor himself, strangely absent for much of the heresy, holed up in his palace on Terra.
Right. It's like, where is he during all of this? The galaxy is burning, and the most powerful being in it is nowhere to be seen.
Exactly.
But Visions of Heresy does give us some insight. It reveals that he's been working on a project of vital importance, the Imperial Webway.
The Webway. His grand plan to create these stable tunnels through the warp, bypassing the dangers of regular warp travel altogether.
A way to free humanity from their reliance on the chaotic currents of the warp.
If it had worked, it could have changed everything. Maybe even prevented the Horus Heresy from happening in the first place.
The ultimate irony.
The very solution that could have saved everything, sabotaged by the events it was meant to prevent.
Talk about a Shakespearean tragedy, the Emperor so close to achieving his dream, only to see it crumble before his eyes.
It adds a whole other layer of tragedy to the Horus Heresy, doesn't it? All the death, all the destruction, maybe it could have been avoided.
But that's what Visions of Heresy does so well. It doesn't give us easy answers.
It leaves us with more questions than we started with.
It forces us to confront the complexities of power, the seductive nature of ambition, and the weight of impossible choices.
So Horus's forces have breached the Imperial Palace, the Loyalists are making their final stand, and the Emperor, his grand vision shattered, emerges to face his fallen son.
It's a battle for the ages, the climax of this galaxy-spanning conflict.
And the book captures it all so vividly, the clash of titans, the weight of history, the sense of both sides fighting for what they believe in, even if it's twisted and broken.
You feel the Emperor's sorrow, his reluctance to fight his own son, even as Horus unleashes the full might of chaos against him.
A tragic confrontation, father against son, each believing they are in the right.
In the end, the Emperor does emerge victorious, but at a terrible cost. Horus is slain, his rebellion crushed, but not before dealing a mortal blow to his father.
A Pyrrhic victory if there ever was one. The Emperor lives, but only as a shell of his former self, confined to the Golden Throne.
His dream of a golden age for humanity lies in ruins around him.
And the Imperium is forever changed. The Emperor's vision, twisted into a grim parody, the Space Marine legions fractured, the galaxy plunged into an era of endless war.
It's a bleak ending, but fitting for a story as dark and tragic as the Horus Heresy. Visions of Heresy doesn't just tell this story. It immerses us in it, the hope, the betrayal, the despair, those fleeting moments of heroism.
It stays with you long after you put the book down. Makes you think about the nature of power, the cost of ambition, the resilience of the human spirit.
And even in the face of such overwhelming darkness, Visions of Heresy leaves us with a question, a glimmer of hope. Could the Webway, the Emperor's unfinished masterpiece, still hold the key to a brighter future for humanity?
A way to break free from the warp's dangers, to reclaim the lost glory of the Imperium. It's a tantalizing thought, and that's the enduring appeal of Warhammer 40K. Even in the grimmest darkness, there's always a flicker of hope. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Horus Heresy. Until next time, may your bolters be ever ready and your faith in the Emperor unwavering.